And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger, roll, planet.
Water towers fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Fighting downside FD off. Bring in FD off. Off. It's orange! 145!
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage. Put that in the big bag, Eagle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
The methane would be igniting the flare, correct?
Yikes. You dead? Sure. We don't need any more of these.
Good evening. You are taking a live look right now at Space Launch Complex 40 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida, where SpaceX is ready to try once again to launch Falcon 9 and the RRT-1 mission. I am Sawyer Rosenstein. I will be your host for today's launch stream. Hopefully everybody enjoyed the premiere of This Week in Spaceflight and are now joining us here. And I see all those 5x5s. Of course, I am not the only voice that you'll be hearing today. I am also joined by Adrian. How's it going, Adrian?
Absolutely fantastic, Sawyer. Let's hope every launch parameter today plays nicely with this rocket, and we will see everything go according to plan. But so far, we have not heard or seen any indication that that might not be the case, with SpaceX website still confirming a launch is on track.
That's what we want to hear, is a launch on track. And speaking of track, the person who will help us track the launch from the field is Max. How's it going, Max?
Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to another stream and to I have to say, a rather gloomy night here at the Kennedy Space Center, looking over toward the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. But as the Mark 1 eyeballs appear to be looking, the weather does seem to be improving at least a little bit. So hopefully Falcon 9 can get airborne and onto orbit tonight.
And speaking of gloomy, coming to us from overseas near the UK area, we have the fantastic Jay Keegan pushing the buttons, pulling the levers, and bringing all of the views to you, who I promise, Jay is not gloomy. But as you can see there, the weather has been a little iffy. Right now you see 71 degrees Fahrenheit, 22°C, a little bit of a breeze, and very high humidity. Max, it was a little wet out there before. How's the weather currently looking?
So, as you hinted, the weather has been it's been rainy on and off all day today, so pretty much everywhere you step, everywhere you look, every bit of air you are breathing is very, very, very humid. It's very wet out today. But currently, as it stands, the cloud layer has seemed to have lifted a little bit, and the winds are calm, and of course, no rain is falling at the moment. Hopefully, it stays that way. But I believe the 45th Weather Squadron last forecasted a 70 or 80% chance of favorable weather for tonight. I could be completely, let's see.
75.
75, right in the middle. How about that? So as it stands right now, conditions are looking, dare I say, favorable for liftoff. Although, because we can't really see the clouds as well as we normally could in daytime, that could change rapidly. So just on air, Sawyer, Adrian, and Jay in the back, if I have to suddenly bag the cameras and run for cover, I will give you guys a heads up as quick as I can. So it changes that quickly around here.
We appreciate it. And yeah, that was part of the issue on the last launch attempt. We were waiting for that T-minus 20-minute, 20-second vent, and it never came, as weather played an issue in the end of the previous launch attempt, shall we say. I am not going to make the mistake again and say the S word. But
yeah, please don't.
yeah. What we will also not say is what RRT-1 stands for, because we honestly have no idea, but we have a very good inclination of what this mission actually is. Adrian, can you break down the RRT for us?
Yeah, absolutely. The suspicion for that is that it might stand for Retro Reflective Target 1, which is an experiment that is supposed to launch on the GPS 310 satellite. So while neither SpaceX nor anybody else has so far acknowledged that this might be a GPS 3 generation satellite that is launching on this Falcon, the trajectory, the basically everything about this rocket and where it flies points to the exact payload, comparing it to previous GPS-3 satellites that have launched on Falcon. So we are fairly sure this might be a GPS satellite. And again, this payload, the Retro Reflective Target 1, is supposed to be an additional instrument that is launching on this mission that will enable range measurements to be performed on a sub-centimeter level using basically a reflective laser ranging equipment. There are actually pictures of that if it is on launching on this. Quite interesting because you can basically it's like a giant multiple mirror tool. And I will actually find a picture of that I saw, and we'll post it so we can just show it on stream later. But quite interesting. Again, we cannot fully confirm what this payload is, but as you said, Sawyer, we are supposed to have a pretty good guess.
Yeah, given the medium Earth orbit, given where it's expected to go, all of the parameters
Yes.
of it would make sense for this being GPS 3. And we have even reached out to the US Space Force to try and get confirmation, but they did not reply back. So, we're about 99.9% positive, let's say that. But we will continue to call it RRT-1 through this. As for the recovery as well, that also kind of indicates the direction it's going in regards to a GPS satellite. Max, where is this booster going, and can you tell us a little bit about the booster that's flying?
Absolutely. So on the docket over at Slick 40 tonight is booster B1085. It is one of the youngest boosters in the current Falcon 9 fleet, and this will hopefully serve as its fourth flight tonight. The three previous being two previous Starlink missions, both Group 677 and 105, and the mission that split those right in the middle was Crew 9. So this booster still has a long life ahead of it, and hopefully it can launch for a long time to come. But aiding in recovery heading northeast today on its way over to a medium Earth orbit is a shortfall of gravitas. We aren't quite sure how far downrange it is, or maybe we do, and I just don't see the figures. But a shortfall of gravitas is set up to catch the first stage tonight, and aiding in fairing recovery a bit further downrange is Bob. So nothing on the surface that would immediately give away anything special or peculiar about this, minus the fact that it's hugging a bit more northeast than most missions say if they're going to the ISS or any Starlink missions that launch northeast. But visually, as long as you are north of the Cape, you should see it very well tonight. Of course, weather pending.
Yeah, there's always the little asterisk of weather pending. And the latest numbers that we have for downrange is that a shortfall of gravitas is about 640-ish kilometers to the northeast, with fairing recovery expected 777 kilometers downrange. So I hope you love sevens. As for any questions you might have, by the way, if you do have them, you can tag us at NASA Spaceflight, and we will do our best to answer as many of your questions as we can as we go through today's countdown.
As you pick that, I think, Jay, I'm not sure if we have that picture already, but if we have that... Oh, nearly. Okay, sorry. Then I will wait for my intro on this picture.
No backseat producing.
No, I'm sorry. I thought it was ready. I'm stupid. Okay, apparently now. So this is apparently a retro-reflective target 1, which basically is like a multi-level in mirrors. Like it has a lot of curved mirrors, and you're able. It's more like a pointing tool, and based on like the reflection and based how it reflects from the target, you are able to very accurately measure the position and time of the satellite target, which of course for GPS, which is exactly doing that, like it needs to be calibrated as accurately as possible, makes a lot of sense. So That's why this target is most likely on the satellite. Again, we don't have fully confirmation if this target isn't fully on board, but we assume.
Yeah. Again, all indications pointing to it, just no official word on it. Which part of the I know people were asking before of, well, why are they being kind of secretive about it? It's just a GPS satellite. Typically because the GPS satellites, yes, they will help you locate how to get to the nearest Starbucks from your car with sat nav or GPS, satellites, things like that. But they also have a lot to do with tracking military assets. They're also used for keeping time, because time is extremely important when you are trying to coordinate all these GPS satellites. There's a lot that goes into it. So they try and keep it semi-secretive until it's up and running. And also, Adrian, I think it's worth pointing out, because we don't really talk about it that often, that when we say GPS, it is not. It is actually a name for the United States system. There are other global positioning systems out there.
Yeah, absolutely. The GPS is I think originally it was called Navstar GPS. And there are other systems. For example, we have the European Union's Galileo system, which is very much kind of doing the same. I think we have the Russian Global Navigation Satellite System, GLONASS. We have China's Baidu system. All of them provide essentially the same, right? It's essentially exact positioning and exact timing of certain places. All of these have also semi-military uses, because that's why all of these are not like, that's the reason why, for example, China or Russian assets, they are also the positioning asset. Otherwise, they would just all use GPS. But of course, in the case we never hoped for, but in the case of like a needed war, you would be very vulnerable if your whole targeting of all of your missile systems is depending on other nations' positioning system. So that's why all of these nations prefer to have their own constellation. And again, GPS is the United States global positioning system.
Yeah. Again, like you said, they all serve the same purpose. We tend to all just call it all GPS, but there is that specific indicator for each country's, which...
And all of oh, good. Sorry, I thought you were finished.
No, you go right ahead.
And all of them are kind of semi-classified. Like this kind of behavior that we are seeing right now on this mission is very similar to how the European Union treats Galileo satellites. It's very similar to how China treats Baidu launch systems. For Baidu, for example, they a lot of times say it's for measurement and like surveillance and stuff. They're all very careful to word what this is actually all for. And that's very like popular amongst all of these systems.
Exactly. And by the way, your EU team must love Queen, because with the satellites having to bounce the signal back and forth from the ground so many times, it just goes Galileo, 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 Galileo. First pun of the night, and that one was one of my worst ever. That's how it's gonna be, I guess.
They're worse.
I'll take that as a compliment that wasn't my worst. Okay. We should be coming up though on the timeline here, getting ready to finally figure out if they are going to fuel up this puppy tonight, as they discuss whether they are no-go for fuel. As Max was talking about earlier, of course, the weather, something that they will be keeping an eye on as they go through with today's attempt. One big difference from the last time they tried is that the booster recovery weather per the 45th Weather Squadron is that the booster recovery weather is low, meaning it's not horrible, as it was moderate the other day. So hopefully at T-minus 38 minutes, they'll do the go for fueling. At T-minus 35, they will actually fuel, at which point we will keep an eye on the rocket for frost. Which, when we're looking at the rocket, there's also something interesting worth looking at here. And that is, if you look very closely right above the black interstage, there is a gray bar. Adrian, what is that for?
It's a mission extension kit, as we call it. Basically, this is supposed to be a medium Earth orbit mission. Medium Earth orbit mission usually means that there's a burn significantly later than just a few minutes into the mission. So what this mission extension kit does is basically it helps them condition their fuel in a certain way and helps it keep it in a certain desired temperature during the coasting phase until they reach that moment where they need to reignite that stage again.
We've seen it a lot on Falcon Heavy missions. It's not really very often that we see it on Falcon 9. In fact,
Yeah.
the only other GPS 3 satellite that actually had the mission extension kit when it launched on Falcon was SV03.
Yep. And in this case, of course, for the people who are like interested in it, of course, with providing darker material, you're helping something to heat up more. In this case, it's RP-1 that they are keeping from freezing. The RP-1 needs to stay in a certain temperature corridor, and for sure they cannot freeze because you don't want to blast your engine with ice. So that's one of the reasons, and that kit basically helps the RP-1 stay nice and cozy.
And there's a great zoomed in shot. You can see that mission extension kit quite clearly, again, right above that black interstage area separating the first and second stages.
Yep,
So-
and it also kind of helps you to get the ratio of RP-1 to liquid oxygen on tank, by the way.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And it's interesting the fact that they load the RP-1 and the LOX at the same time on the first stage, but they do it separately on that smaller second stage. Again, starting with the RP-1, because, again, talking about it not freezing, that is at a much warmer temperature in comparison to the super-cooled liquid oxygen that also gets loaded.
Yep, absolutely. And I also want to quickly point out in our previous discussion about the GPS and Galileo, since 2004, both constellation actually work together. The commercial side of both GPS and Galileo have had partnership agreements since 2004, and there are certain commercial usages where the European constellation Galileo and the American constellation GPS work together in providing a better like customer experience and making sure that the coverage overall is better for these kind of non-military commercial usage.
Yeah, the key emphasis there, the non-military uses.
Yeah. We're talking like there's probably a very big difference in accuracy and priority in the military versus non-military. I know, for example, for Galileo, there's certain speeds and altitude where they will restrict you because that could also be used for military usage.
Also, I saw someone point out with the Galileo instead of Figaro, the question is, will it go?
God.
Let's. I guess we'll get back to some more actual questions here.
Please.
Jeff is wondering, Max, is it too late for a jellyfish?
Unfortunately so. Yeah, the sunset just under 2 hours ago, and the ideal time for a sunset jellyfish is around anywhere from 25 to 45 minutes after sunset. That's when it's most ideal. Also around the same window for sunrise, although a bit later, probably around T-minus 40 minutes to 1 hour before sunrise. But yes, unfortunately, we are too far away for a jellyfish tonight. But for those who are unaware, a jellyfish is when, say, Falcon 9 or Atlas 5 or any rocket flies within, let's say 30 minutes of either sunrise or sunset, and as the rocket ascends, while it may be in the dark here close to the surface, as it ascends into the atmosphere, higher and higher into the atmosphere, it will begin to fly back into the sun's rays in the exhaust particulates, whether it be hydrogen, solid rocket motors, or in this case RP-1. Those particulates will begin to be lit up by the sun's rays, which contrasts against the dark sky. Which contrasts against the dark sky incredibly vividly. So what you get what you see is essentially this bright white or blue or orange, depending on what time of day, cloud just building and building and expanding in the sky. And it's one of the most breathtaking things you will ever see. It is spectacular. Also, if Falcon 9 or any other rocket flies within probably 1 or 2 hours of sunrise, while you might not get a jellyfish, those exhaust particulates, especially from the upper stage, hang around in the atmosphere, and as the sun's light begins to hit it, as the sun comes up, you will get artificial noctilucent clouds contrasting against the dark sky, which is also incredibly beautiful and something we got around 1 to 2 weeks ago on a previous Starlink mission that launched very, very, very early in the morning. But long-winded, to answer your question, unfortunately, yes, we are too late for that.
Yeah, but again, those of you along the northeast in this trajectory, if it happens to be clear enough out, sometimes that nozzle plume expansion will be just enough that you can still get a gorgeous view from it.
I think
I have-
actually, when Polaris Dawn launched a few months ago, since they were also flying northeast and flying somewhat close to sunrise, the upper stage plume expansion from Falcon 9's upper stage was visible from as far north and inland as Pittsburgh. People were posting pictures going nuts around Pittsburgh or the central Pennsylvania area, which is remarkably far away to be seeing a launch. But that's how far away you can see a rocket fly, assuming the conditions around day or night are in favor with you.
So essentially, we're going to get a whole bunch more people thinking that it's drones.
Essentially, yes.
Oh, please.
Well, what we really are hoping for, if we say please, is fueling, which at this point
Yes.
hopefully should be underway at the T-minus 35-minute mark. So if all is going to plan, they will begin loading the RP-1, rocket propellant 1 refined form of kerosene, as well as the LOX, the liquid oxygen, into the first stage of the booster. As we just mentioned a short time ago, they will just start loading the RP-1 into the second stage. That should go till about T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds when we get the best vent or the LOX chill down, and then that will be followed 4 minutes later by the actual loading of the liquid oxygen. And a big asterisk for all of the timings for now, because this is a semi-classified mission, they have not given us a to the second T0 as they typically do. So the clock may or may not be off for about a minute until we get to that T-minus 20 minute, 20 second vent. Once we see that vent, we will have a much more accurate T0 for you.
I also do we still want to talk a bit about GPS if we want to dive further into that, or
Of course, why not?
because again, 99% this is a GPS, and just to point this out, this is the third generation of GPS, of course, and this will be the last one on Falcon, because there's already 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 launches so far that have been happened on Falcon. And on Falcon 9 for the third generation. I already see you, Alex. I'm getting there. So this is the last launch of the first part of the third generation on Falcon. 3 other launches are are actually contracted to happen on Vulcan Centaur, with the first one as early as potentially January 2025. We'll see about that. This is not the end of the evolution of GPS, though, because after that, we have the next generation, which is a GPS 3F, which is already in construction, done by Lockheed Martin. They have already been contracted to construct these 3F satellites, and the first launch is also already booked. These will, however, no longer launch on the Falcon 9. This launch for the actual first launch of 3F01, will happen on Falcon Heavy. And the 3F version, the second version of the 3 GPS, consists of nuclear detonation detection systems, fully digital navigation, and an improved satellite bus, which is offering improved resilience to cyber attacks of the GPS system.
Yes, and in a way that makes it no way confusing whatsoever, we believe this is, as mentioned, GPS-3 Space Vehicle 10. What happened to 7, 8, 9? Well, 6 was afraid of 7. No, those are the ones that are scheduled to launch on Vulcan, if I understand correctly.
That's correct. And the main reason why the future one will be launching on Falcon Heavy is Falcon Heavy will directly lift it into its final orbit versus this one, which just lifts it into a transfer orbit for the final orbit. So basically, the Space Force is planning together with Lockheed Martin to get rid of a few needed systems to lift our satellite into orbit, and would use that weight differently.
Speaking of weight, Falcon 9 should be getting heavier and frostier. As SpaceX says, propellant load is about to begin, and teams are keeping an eye on weather ahead of tonight's Falcon 9 launch of RRT-1. So they are really, really trying to get this off tonight.
And we can also visually confirm now at this point, we can see frost on the bottom of the liquid oxygen tank on Falcon 9's first stage, which is just above the tree line there. It's a bit more difficult to see on newer boosters because typically the frost contrasts against the darker soot finish on older boosters. But in this case, with this one only having flown 3 times, there isn't a lot of dark soot to contrast against. But tonight, thankfully, we have a clear visual indication that prop load has begun, of course, on top of SpaceX's tweets. So, fingers crossed, they are going to go for it.
Oh yeah, so we see frost on that particular Falcon 9, and I say that because there are actually 2 Falcon 9s currently vertical in Florida. There's the one at Slick 40, as you see on the left side of your screen, and on the right, there is one at 39A. Max, what's over at 39A?
Yeah, so over on 39A, speaking of young boosters, is Falcon 9 B10, let's see here, what is it, B10 1090, about to hopefully embark on its first flight tomorrow. So it is a fleet, a bunch of young Falcon 9s are flying at this point, and hopefully this mission is for the SES-03B mPower 7 and 8, hopefully launching tomorrow afternoon. Of course, weather pending, and many other factors, of course, pending with that as well. But there are 2 Falcon 9s currently vertical, and one is getting frosty and getting ready to fly.
Exactly. And as we pass the T-minus 30-minute mark, for those who may just be joining, this is the RRT-1 mission, which we believe is related to special retro reflectors that will be on the GPS-3 Space Vehicle 10 that should be flying tonight. Again, we have not gotten the official confirmation on that, but given this is a northeast launch going into medium Earth orbit, every single detail indicates that this is the next GPS-3 launch. Again, hopefully happening approximately 29 minutes from now. I do want to thank some support that we got here. Todd Johnson gifting 20 Red Team memberships. If you did get one of those, please make sure you thank Todd, and hopefully you enjoy some of the perks that come with being a member, including a couple of photos that you get exclusively here, occasionally member streams that we do, and Snot Garden, along with that, saying that they just went to the Smithsonian Air and Space today and would love to watch a stream where Jack, Max, and or D geek out over the camera equipment used during Apollo and Corona.
I
Thoughts,
second
Max?
this. I second this 100%. Let's make this happen.
Oh, I would watch that in a heartbeat. That sounds amazing. We talk a lot about the first stage and the landing, which this one is a drone ship landing to the northeast, but we don't often talk about the second stage, which also burns up and re-enters the atmosphere. So Adrian, supersonic retro propulsion, of course, got to say that, asking, does the second stage reorient itself to a specific attitude for re-entry to maximize breakup, or just does it not matter?
To my knowledge, they turn it around, and then, like, they basically let it coast until it's in a good position and then fire it. Because, of course, if you continue firing in the direction where you accelerate, that's not really helping your deorbit case. It actually makes it worse. So you need to fire in the correct direction. Of course, with orientation, sometimes you just have to wait in space to reach to the right direction. You don't always have to reorientate yourself. Sometimes you just reach that by introducing, for example, like a small little row. So yeah, it's always a few tricks there that they can use, and you will rarely have a stage that is completely like consistent and will not move at all in their orientation. So you can just wait until you're favorable.
There you go. And actually, along those lines, we also had a question asking, would it be possible for SpaceX to try to recover second stage Falcon 9s via parachute and or a net, just like the fairing halves? Misty's asking.
The second stage is significantly more heavy than the fairings. First off, that one. That's the first problem. I'm going through a list of problems here. That's already one huge problem you have. Second, right now it's not even close to surviving a re-entry. Like, yes, we say it re-enters, but it re-enters extremely fast, and there's reasons why for other re-entry vehicles such as Starship there's a heat shielding process needed, because otherwise you break up during re-entry, and that's just what most of these stages experience. Like, they are not really hitting the ocean fully intact. They are, when we say re-entry, we say it mostly burns up in the atmosphere, and then a few parts make it on the ground.
And for those who are like yelling at their screens right now, just throw a heat shield on it, or something along those lines, something to have it safe from the heating during reentry. The thing with upper stages on rockets, where every 4 or 5 pounds on a first stage compared to 1 is about the amount of performance that you can get before. I guess that's the weight ratio. Forgive me. It's been a long day. On the first stage, I think you can add about 4 to 5 pounds for losing every 1 pound of payload, whichever you're carrying. Because of the performance and the physics needed for the upper stage, it's literally a 1-to-1 ratio. So if you add, just say, a parachute to keep it simple, or if you want to add some kind of air brake or some other kind of heat shield, that's likely a ton of weight that you are adding to that upper stage, which means that's more work to do for first stage, which means more fuel spent for probably traveling less distance and less altitude and less speed. That means that is also less weight that you can carry as a payload, which for some rockets, their margin is not that great. I mean, luckily Falcon 9 is very capable and has a wide margin depending on where you want to go in orbit. But adding any weight it is a nightmare to try and recover upper stages, is what we're trying to say, especially compared to a first stage. So theoretically, SpaceX could, and also at one point Elon was toying around with the idea of a bouncy house, as we can recall. But it's so difficult to engineer any sort of solution that will work long term, that is not expensive and not heavy. So they could probably, but they will lose a lot of performance from the rocket as a whole. So probably not.
I mean, look at Starship. Like, the moment you're basically, if you go down the row here and are like, let's make the Falcon 9 second stage reusable, then you're talking about we should use like flaps to reduce like the terminal velocity. That's a great idea. Okay, we'll attach flaps. Then you attach a heat shield. Well, you already have flaps. Well, why not use that for the heat shield? And then you're talking about okay, we need to like modify the design, maybe stretch it a bit to give it more surface. And basically you arrive at a mini Starship at that point. You're like, okay, did we just design a Starship? Yes, you did. That's why they're doing it right now with Starship. That's the path they're going, and you can see it with Starship. Raptor is incredibly efficient already, and they're still having trouble reaching positive payloads on Starship. Like, we know they are right now in a situation where Starship still has problems reaching like its payload goals, because they still need to stretch the ship, they need to reduce weight. That's a thing they have talked about, and there's still a lot to do on that front, and Falcon 9 would be no different. You basically develop a new rocket at that point, or at least a new second stage.
And yes, by the way, you did hear Max right. At one point earlier on, they were considering basically a bounce house, essentially, to try and help ease the catch of a second stage of the Falcon. It still blows my mind that was even considered, but then again, they also tried catching fairings with giant nets on top of specialized boats. So
And they did it.
They did catch a few, yeah, until they realized it's easier to just fish them out of the ocean when they parachute down. But yeah.
I want to be in that meeting, by the way. I want to be in a moment where they are talking about it and they're like, yeah, we could just let it splash down, like screw the net. And everybody's like looking at that person in the meeting room, looking at their data and being like, yeah, the net was just cool.
Oh yeah, it sounds. They definitely wanted the cool ways. I mean, a bouncy house for the second stage and a giant net boat for the fairings. It sounds so awesome. And then it's just, we'll burn up the second stages, and then the fairings, I could just fish them out. That's fine.
That's, by the way, a thing I don't understand why more rocket companies do it. Like, I get it, like retro propulsion and everything, that's hard. But like letting fairings splash down and fishing them out of the ocean sounds like something that should be doable for more rocket companies.
Yeah, although a lot of people don't realize these can actually maneuver as well. They
That's
have
true.
small maneuvering mechanisms on them, right?
Yeah, but it sounds like way more like doable than landing a rocket booster. Like landing a rocket booster has so much more strict requirements than landing or like splashing down a fairing, and I wonder if that would maybe that's just a thing of scale. Like maybe for other rocket companies, it just hasn't reached the cadence where that makes sense yet. Huh.
I don't know how well the other ones would fare.
Wow.
No.
Well, the reason I get that groan is because it's a perfect time for us to segue now into what will be the T-minus 20-minute, 20-second
There
vent.
she blows.
And right on time, there it is. Max, what is this vent all about?
So essentially, what SpaceX is doing right now is they are purging and thermally conditioning the propellant lines in the transporter erector in preparation for second stage liquid oxygen loading. And the reason they do this is the last thing you want to do is flow a super cold cryogenic fluid through any pipe that is substantially warmer than the temperature of the fluid itself, because that can cause sudden gas flashing, which is where the fluid suddenly turns into a gas and rapidly expands, and that could either rupture a tube, any plumbing. It can cause a ton of issues. So essentially, any bit of plumbing that you want to flow any of your fuel through, it needs to be at the same temperature or near enough in order to avoid any of those problems that we have talked about, and that is what they are doing now, and that will hopefully conclude in just about a handful of minutes. And once this vent stops, that is an indicator that they have begun LOX loading on the upper stage.
And there we go. And that is all because we are now, as you mentioned, 20 minutes away from the launch of this RRT-1 mission, which, as confusing as it sounds, a reminder, RRT-1 is what we believe the GPS-3 Space Vehicle 10 mission, with special retro reflectors on it. It's part of the RR and the RRT. They have not officially confirmed it. However, this vehicle is expected to go towards the northeast and is expected to go into a medium Earth orbit, and basically everywhere that a GPS-3 satellite would go. So it's GPS-3 SV10 without officially saying it's GPS-3 SV10.
Yep.
And we're now 18 minutes away from that. So for anyone who's just joining, if you have any other questions about this mission or this rocket, feel free to tag us at NASA Spaceflight and ask away. Speaking of the rocket, one thing we haven't addressed yet, Max, Clio VR wants to know, stubby nozzle?
Honestly, we don't know for certain. I mean, we can always speculate, but given the performance needed to bring this payload up to a medium Earth orbit, and also the mission extension kit fitted to the upper stage, I think we can assume that they need the full performance of the full size nozzle tonight. If there was enough prop margin in the first stage to, say, bring it back for an LZ1 or LZ2 landing, maybe they would toy with the idea to save weight and save a little bit of cost on building that upper stage. But given the factors that we know in play now, being the drone ship landing hundreds of kilometers downrange on a shortfall of gravitas, and the mission extension kit on the upper stage indicating a coast period, that likely means that they have the full size nozzle on the upper stage tonight. So no stubby. At least we think. There's no way of confirming until the stages separate. So I guess we'll find out.
We will find out for sure. That extra performance, super helpful. We haven't seen that many stubby nozzles recently, have we?
I don't think we have, actually. It's been a minute. See, we see them somewhat commonly from Vandenberg, given where those payloads are off to relative to the ones launched from here. But yeah, we haven't seen one in a while, have we? I'm kind of sad about it.
I guess they found the efficiency to continue to manufacture these full-sized ones, because for those who don't know, they have two different versions of the Stage 2 nozzle. You have the full-sized one, which is what we're used to seeing. However, they also developed a smaller one, which we refer here as the stubby nozzle, which is done as a way to basically try and speed up the manufacturing, given how many missions a year they're flying. They want to be able to produce as many second stages as possible since those are not reused. So these smaller ones, while they are easier to produce, they do not have as much efficiency as the full-sized Merlin vacuum engines do. So that's why they're not used as often, but they are there as a way to help speed up production for the missions that can handle it.
And just a quick touch or check-in with that vent that we were seeing a few minutes ago, we can obviously see on screen that that has since stopped, which is an indication that the lock floating has begun on Falcon 9's upper stage.
That's what we like to see. Fueling
And,
continuing, and as mentioned, the RP-1 and liquid oxygen continuing to flow simultaneously into that first stage where you see all that frost building up. And now the second stage, which has its RP-1, rocket propellant 1, loaded up, is now getting the liquid oxygen. And this load should go until about a minute and a half before launch, at which case we will see another purge of that line. Although this one not preparing for more fuel loading, this one getting rid of any potential excess liquid oxygen in those lines, which is flammable, and flammable around big flames is usually a bad thing.
Absolutely. Just to add to the stubby nozzle situation, one of the materials they are trying to reduce of uses is niobium, which is used in the nozzle production of the second stage. And with the shorter MBAC nozzle, they are producing 10% less thrust in space, but for that they reduce the amount of rare materials by 75%. So that's the reason they are trying to do that, because niobium is not that easy to find all the time.
What? All of our viewers, just go into your backyard, start digging for it, and send it over to SpaceX.
Yep. If you find some niobium, just DM them something. They would love it.
What we also love is the support from all of you out there. Travis, thank you for coming, a PadRat member. Cassidy gifting a Red Team membership. Thank you so much for that. Telstar86 also gifting a Red Team membership. And then Cassidy Scott with the £5 sterling saying, "Hi all, not a question, but hope everyone has a good night, day, evening, afternoon." Well, thank you. I mean, Max, you've had quite the day so far. Are you able to kind of give a little hint as to where you were?
It has absolutely been a busy day here at the Kennedy Space Center. So, as some of you maybe have seen from other creators and other reporters, photographers on X in particular, today the Kennedy Space Center Public Affairs Office was kind enough to host a group of us over in the vehicle assembly building to view some of the Artemis 2 hardware, being one of the SRB segments that was sitting in the transfer aisle, but also in High Bay 2. They have SLS's core stage in its structure for checkouts before being stacked and mated with the 5-segment solid rocket boosters over in High Bay 3. And also with them, we had all 4 members of the Artemis 2 crew and 2 of their backup crew members as they're with us to have a gaggle conversation, talk with them about things that are happening, especially with the current political climate, and also with the mission being pushed by about another year. Lots to talk about. And then after that, they had us over in the Neil Armstrong Operations and Checkout Facility to see some of the Orion spacecraft in their production. In their various stages of production, mostly with Artemis 3 and Artemis 4. Whether or not whatever comes whatever does end up coming with those spacecraft, we'll have to wait and see. But it has been a very busy day. And then right after that, we went over, myself and a couple of colleagues over here at the press site, transferred right over into preps for the mission tonight. So, yeah, it has been a busy day, and I still have not had time to go through any of my imagery yet. It's been so busy. But expect that either tonight or tomorrow at some point.
So, in other words, that means now's the perfect time to become a member so you get to see some of the member photos from your event, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Haha, subtle plug. Let's see. Here's actually a really good question. We addressed it earlier, but for people that might be joining, as we look at the rocket, there is that gray stripe. Just a reminder, Adrian, what is that gray stripe on the upper stage? Christian's asking.
That gray star right at the upper stage is the mission extension kit, which is, of course, there to basically help keep the RP-1 warm during the coasting phase, because this is a medium of orbit launch, which means there's a certain amount of coasting and of the second stage before they reignite it for another burn, and to keep the RP-1 hot enough during that coast phase to not get it too cold or even freezing, they use this gray stripe to increase the temperature that the RP-1 receives from the sun, and with that keep it warmer.
Exactly. It's not very often that you do see any of the missions with that mission extension kit stripe. But we have seen it in the past, although typically on Falcon Heavy. And in fact, I believe we have some prints at shop.nasaspaceflight.com that might even have that mission extension kit. But let's say you don't want the gray stripe on yours. Don't worry, we have plenty of other prints available at shop.nasaspaceflight.com, both as metal prints and as high-quality posters as well. Of course, we have everything from the most recent flights of Starship, as well as the landing and the Kennedy Space Center, some of my favorite shots. As you saw there, the gorgeous one of the VAB. We have plenty of Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy launch shots as well for you to enjoy, including this spectacular one by Max of the recent, I believe that was Europa Clipper mission. So
That's actually Goes You way back in
that
June.
was Ghost. Oh, well, that rocket does indeed goes there. So thank you, Max. And
Oh, gosh.
a reminder, when you get one of these prints, you also help support the person that took it. So shop.nasaspaceflight.com to check out the prints, posters, and all of our other awesome merch.
I want to add a quick caveat, because we are that close to the holidays, that at this point, while I would of course love if you order something from the store to gift to your friends and to your family, we are 7 days away from Christmas, and international shipping in December is rough. So if you have a very time-sensitive present you want, I would at this point maybe be careful to order, because we are not Amazon. We don't offer next-day shipping. It's just not possible for a small store like us. And we don't want to create a situation where you order something today as a Christmas present and it just doesn't arrive in time, because December shipping can be crazy. Just want to be honest here with everybody so you don't get disappointed.
Yeah, speaking of crazy, I know things are about to get crazy over at the press site for you, Max. So before you head out and get all of your cameras ready and set, we did have a question on how's the weather looking from Joe?
So weather has been the biggest question mark, both here and for the booster recovery areas in the Atlantic Ocean over the past few days. So as we saw earlier on the forecast, the 45th Weather Squadron has forecasted a 75% chance of favorable weather at liftoff tonight. It has been raining on and off all day. It's kind of nasty out here tonight, very humid. A bit of a breeze, as you can see probably from the camera shake. Still kind of raining on and off here and there. But as far as the Mark 1 eyeballs are concerned, I do see some stars hanging out over us, and the clouds may be starting to be friendly toward us here at the press site. So hopefully it stays that way. But at this point, gentlemen, I do believe I have to leave you to prepare some more cameras and make sure y'all have the best views possible for liftoff. So thank you very much, gentlemen, and everyone watching, and I will see y'all on the other side.
Indeed, we will see you and talk to you after the launch of the RRT-1 mission, which again is all but officially confirmed as the GPS-3 Space Vehicle 10 mission, set to fly into medium Earth orbit. Again, this will be heading to the northeast, so if you're anywhere along the northeastern part of the United States, up the Carolinas, potentially even up towards Virginia, and that way, maybe even some Pennsylvania if the plume is wide enough, keep an eye out for this SpaceX Falcon 9 launch. That first stage will be landing on a drone ship right near the Carolinas, a little over 640 kilometers away from this launch site at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. And right now, the engines should be getting nice and chilled. So, why at 7 minutes does SpaceX chill those engines?
Yeah, absolutely. You don't really. There's several reasons. The first one is usually a lot of materials don't really like rapid contraction because of cold. If you usually put any material at that cold point, because liquid oxygen is really cold, there's usually a lot of materials that wouldn't like to be cryoshocked like that in a certain very short amount of time, which is why you gently cool it down over time to reduce that effect. There's another effect because imagine you're running minus 200 degrees cold liquid oxygen and it comes into contact with, under high load, under high flow rate, it comes into contact with a 10 degrees outside wall. You have a rapid expansion of that liquid oxygen then. So you can also have an effect where you run all of that liquid oxygen through your pipes. It rapidly expands because, well, it instantly goes gaseous. And you get a situation where that just bursts pipes and damages your vehicle. So multiple reasons there, but yeah, that's the main ones.
Yes, we can all just imagine minus 200 degree liquid oxygen off the top of our heads. Let's see. Rodent saying came into some money, so have some. Thank you very much for the super chat. And Apocalypse Cow, Space Moo, thank you for gifting 5 Red Team memberships. We really appreciate it. So now we are going to get into the very busy part of the count, shall we say. So there's a lot of things coming up here as we hit 4.5 minutes. Right now should be the retraction of the transporter erector, which is the metal structure, sometimes known as the strongback, that is essentially attached to the rocket. It leans back a whopping, ready for this, 1.8 degrees. A whole bunch to get out of the way at liftoff. Don't worry, once it actually lifts off, it does throw all the way back and out of the way. But Adrian, that strongback provides a lot of vital things for the rocket.
I mean, basically everything, right? It's that strongback helps load RP-1, liquid oxygen, has data connections, has all kinds of communications connection to the rocket. Usually, at least for other rockets, I'm not sure if we know if that is also the case for Falcon. There's also an inhibitor that controls certain part of the flight termination system in these QDs and in the strongback. So there's all kinds of different. Basically everything that the rocket needs. Helium for the COPVs that is used to repressurize the tanks. It's a lot. So yeah, that strongback basically does all the magic for the rocket until liftoff, where it then is no longer needed.
Yeah, fuel, data, gas, even air conditioning for the satellites, because it's Florida. Of course, even the satellites need AC.
Everything in Florida needs AC.
Yeah, isn't that the truth? In about 30 seconds or so, we should have the final loading of fuel finishing off for the first stage of Falcon 9. Again, that is the RP-1, Rocket Propellant 1, which is from kerosene, and the supercooled liquid oxygen. The two of those mixing together, helping to produce the thrust on the 9 engines at the base of this Falcon 9 rocket. Also, on the rocket, one of the things that we don't always mention is something called TTEB, which is basically a green flash of light. And that green flash is what helps ignite the engines at T-minus 3 seconds. So things that we can always keep an eye out for on the vehicle. And that's also used to relight the engines for re-entry and landing, right?
Absolutely, and there's just a certain amount of engines that have this TTAP loaded for relight. It's 3 engines that have containers to actually relight. So it's not like they can down select, right? If they lose these engines, they cannot just switch it to other engines. There's just 3 engines that are supposed to reignite. and these are the only ones that have the capability to reignite. Everything else is basically ground started, and after that, once they go out, they are out. Because
Yeah, so
again,
let's hope
without
that doesn't happen.
I feel like that's also a misconception that a lot of people that come into rocketry have. They come in and they expect, like, if you just mix RP1 liquid oxygen and then hold like a small spark to it, it will just burn. It's very more complicated than that. Igniting a rocket stage can be very, very complicated. You have all kinds of different problems, also how to spin up your turbo pumps and everything. So it's not that easy as just spark igniting it.
One thing you don't want to spark to ignite is the gas that you see on your screen right now. That is liquid oxygen venting out as gaseous oxygen at this point. Quite flammable. That is why they purge the line that they used to fill the second stage with liquid oxygen one last time, get rid of any excess that could potentially burn up as the rocket flies by it. That means this rocket is fully fueled. And as we now hit T-minus 1 minute, that also means that the computers on board of Falcon 9 have control of the countdown. And that means that Falcon 9, as they say, has entered startup. That also means the tanks are being pressurized to their final flight levels, and all that's remaining now is the go for launch from the launch director, which we should be getting momentarily.
And a quick note for everybody watching. There we go. The fairings on this flight are both doing their second flight, and with that, I'm leaving and just let you commentate the launch, Sawyer.
Thank you. And we will be quiet after it lifts off so you can hear the launch audio, but we have that go for launch about 20 seconds from now. So as mentioned, keep an eye at the base of that rocket for the flash, followed by the big plume, and then of course the ignition at T0. 10 seconds away. Keep an eye on the bottom of that rocket. And we have ignition and liftoff of RRT-1. And it has now cleared the tower at pad 40. Go, GPS 3, go. Stunning views as Falcon 9 passed through that cloud earlier and now passing through Max Q. That is the time when the most aerodynamic forces are pushing against the Falcon 9 vehicle. And as it goes through that cloud, you also get a beautiful view of the 9 engines and that plume expansion, which gets wider as it gets to the thinner parts of the atmosphere.
About as beautiful as a Falcon 9 launch gets with these clouds and everything. I think that's very much peak, and also basically as good as sound as we get. Like that was just peak sound for Falcon 9. Absolutely wonderful.
Beautiful sound, and while we may lose some of the ground views behind the clouds, we should still get some awesome views. There's one of our tracking cameras. As we get ready for 3 events in rapid succession, we have MECO, which will be main engine cutoff, followed by separation of the first and second stages, and that will be followed by the ignition of that Merlin vacuum second stage engine. So that should be happening in just a couple seconds.
There it is.
That is MECO, main engine cutoff.
And you should see a flash of the second stage any second now, as it is ignited.
There it is. That looks like a good second stage ignition from what we could see there from our cameras. And then that will be followed shortly thereafter by the separation of the payload fairing, although I don't believe that that will be shown at any point because of the semi-classified nature of the payload.
That is very likely. And also, we can confirm now that it is a full nozzle that is flying on this mission.
Yes, it is a full nozzle and confirmation no views of stage 2, which, as a reminder, while this is called RRT-1, all of the indications are that this is indeed the GPS-3 Space Vehicle 10. While they haven't had official confirmation, it's 99.9% likely, given all of the publicly available data. And that gorgeous plume expansion, again, as mentioned, the higher it goes, the more it expands, and you really get a great view of that. If anyone sees this along the eastern coast of the United States, please send it to us on social media. We're on X, we're on Facebook, we're on TikTok, even Instagram. Send it to us. We would
Threads.
love to see your views.
Yep. And fairing separation has been confirmed by SpaceX, SpaceX, even though we are not getting views of it. Just pointing that out.
And as you mentioned earlier, a reminder, we learned that each of these fairings are on their second flight. So those are set to be recovered downrange to be flown again, about 777 kilometers from where they took off.
Absolutely. And you know who has seen more Falcon flights than 2?
Who?
Max.
Hi, Max. How was that?
Hello. My goodness. We often complain about how clouds sometimes obscure our views and sometimes ruin the launch experience. But I tell you what, that was one of the coolest things I've ever seen, like by far. There's something about Falcon 9 flying through a layer of low to mid, like thin cloud, and seeing the light bounce off of the clouds and shine back onto the body of the fairings or the actual tank structure and lighting up the entire rocket. And not to mention, I hope you guys noticed, but there was a wicked vapor cone as the vehicle began to go supersonic at that point.
Yes.
That was wicked. And that's one of the things that you can get with a very wet, dense, moist atmosphere tonight as the vehicle begins to go supersonic and those shockwaves build. And oh my goodness gracious, that was gorgeous. Wow, I cannot wait to see the replay of that. But also with the amount of moisture in the air, thick, moist, dense air carries sound a lot better, and also the sound has a lot bigger chances to reverb off of the clouds and bounce back to where we are. So hopefully the audio came through to you guys as well, but that was incredible. And honestly, it's also a huge relief to see this mission finally get off the ground after the weather spoiling so many days of flight opportunities, and also the one in countdown scrub a few days ago. But oh my goodness, that was incredible.
Yes, once all of this is over, we will have replays of the launch. I promise you that.
It looked like SpaceX has a few issues with this camera. Like
it's a little
that
noisy.
Yeah, it looks like that camera took a bit of a hit, and there's or maybe it's just very, very dark. But I think that's very, very dark. There it goes better.
Yeah,
And that's the entry
as long
burn.
as there's no issues with this, which is the entry burn, of which it looks like, just based on the pattern, that is 3 engines igniting to help fight fire with fire, right, Adrian?
Yeah, absolutely. There's 2 effects on this. Of course, the obvious effect, which is slowdown, but also you have basically the exhaust and the power of that flames pushing away potential pressure that would hit the rocket. So you're kind of fighting fire with fire, and while you slow down, you also help your rocket survive this very critical part of reentry. And there we now see plasma forming on the grid winds, which is very visible here, very dark at night, as the rocket goes through hypersonic speeds.
If there's ever any indication of just how fast this first stage is going, plasma does not just build up on any surface just because. I mean, Falcon 9 is absolutely screaming right now. That is incredible to see, and it's most prominent to see, of course, when it's dark out because the plasma is so bright in contrast on the surface of those grid fins.
And for those who don't
Absolutely.
know, those grid fins, by the way, the little square things you see that I think look like waffles, those help steer the vehicle as it gets into the thicker part of the atmosphere. They're not as useful in the thinner part, but as it gets to the thicker part, especially before landing, you will see those kind of swivel, and that will help steer Falcon 9 in addition to any engine steering.
And there you can already see the drone chip, by the way. It's very hard, but there was like a very bright pixel just there. It's always like right now it's a bit of there it is again. That's the drone chip. You can see it in the. It's hard to see, but it is there.
Yes, so coming up next will be that landing burn, single engine, and there it goes, igniting. You see those grid fins now steering. So
And
we will
there-
hope for a clean landing leg deploy and a touchdown. So let's see what we can see and if we could potentially hear it.
Eh,
Landing leg deploy.
There's
Great view
landing
of
leg
our
deploy.
drone ship, a short
Terminal
follow
park orbit
toss.
insertion.
And there you saw and heard
Stage
the
1 landing confirmed.
and saw the
Beautiful. We have another successful landing. Well, this is a young booster. It adds another tally to its success rate there. And the other thing that you also heard is SECO, which is second engine cutoff, that Merlin vacuum engine shutting down, and nominal orbital insertion, meaning it is exactly where it is supposed to be. So Falcon 9 doing its job absolutely perfectly. That is what we love to see.
And what you usually will see now, in a few minutes from now, maximum, is the transporter erector already going up again to pick up the frame, and they usually just prepare the next mission, which is at this point expected from pad 40 to be on, I think it was Friday. No, it's actually still on Thursday. Thursday night to Friday. The Astranis Block 2 mission is most likely on the calendar here for Pad 40, which might be somewhere in that area.
And the next launch for SpaceX from the Cape is already out at the launch pad and vertical over at Pad 39A at the Kennedy Space Center, not too far from where this mission just took off. So SpaceX keeping up the pace. And when you said maximum, did you mean like to its maximum point, or were you giving Max a nickname?
I'm both.
Maximum from the field. The other thing that we got for the beautiful audio was the VAB squeal. Some people may have heard that squealing sound, which I don't think most people realize how that works. We hear it a lot, and in particular from Pad 40. We don't hear it as much from 39A, and there's a reason for that, right?
You asking me, Sawyer?
Yes, I am, Maximum.
Oh my God. Well, yes, and that is mostly because of the angle. So the surfaces of the VAB facing north, east, south, and west, Slick 40 in comparison to the directions that the surfaces of the VAB face, the energy coming off of the exhaust from Falcon 9 is at a much more ideal angle from Slick 40 compared to LC 39A to, I guess, reverb and shake the actual panels on the VAB, thus getting the VAB squeal. But I have to tell you what, I was a bit too fixated on the track tonight to make sure that I had Falcon 9 in frame going through the clouds, and also just in awe of how it looked going through the clouds, and also with that insane vapor cone as it went supersonic. I was a bit too fixated to hear that, so I don't recall hearing it this time. But that's only because I was focused on other things, as difficult as that is to say, I guess. But hopefully we will hear it in the audio. And of course, as you already said, Sawyer, it sounds like you did. So
I
That-
can
that's great.
guarantee you we heard it. It was gorgeous. The sound playing absolutely beautiful tonight. Also beautiful tonight, as you see on the right side of the screen, and the crowd slowly started chanting, "Moon, moon, moon." How's that for a throwback to Artemis 1?
That was a good
Uh,
one.
Yes, and we almost have all of the replays pulled, so if you want to try and hear that VA squeal again, stick around for just a couple more minutes, and we will have that replay for you. So stay tuned, we're not done just yet. And again, a reminder, if anyone did catch any views of the launch, send them to us on social media, NASA Spaceflight on X. NASA Spaceflight is also on Facebook, NASA Spaceflight_IG on Instagram, all the different handles there. And I'm sure we'll see some awesome photos from potentially Max, of the launch, and if not, our Cape team gets some awesome photos regardless. So we will have that replay momentarily. I do want to thank some people who got some items from the shop as that launch was going on at shop.nasaspaceflight.com. Peter saying, let's go SpaceX. Let's see some fire getting that Flight 6 patch, which are indeed now shipping to some people. I've seen people with pictures of the patch. We love to see it.
Yes.
And then Alex Plant, thank you for becoming a PadRat member as well. Really appreciate all of the support during the launch stream tonight and landing, I guess. Let's see, as we wait for that replay to go. The question now is, we know that the 144 launch, or 148, which is their original goal, is kind of out of the question. But Adrian, what are we thinking for the pace for the rest of the year now with this launch? Do you think they'll hit 136, 138? What are we thinking?
They are on track to about 9 or so more launches. Somewhere like probably between 7, 8, 9, somewhere in there, until the end of the year. So that's the most likely. I mean, we are right now targeting about 3 days until the next 40 launch. So that means they will probably launch to 3 to 4 more launches from 40. And then probably like 2 or 3 more from 39A, makes it 5, 6. And then you have the pace of Vandenberg, also like probably 3 more. Somewhere like, it comes down to weather and everything, but somewhere in the range of like 7 to 9 for until the end of the year.
Because what are they at now? 127 if you count Falcon Heavy, is it?
Oh, that's a good question if you count Falcon Heavy. I think if you count Starship as well, it's 131. If I'm not fully mistaken. I think,
that would make sense.
I think it's 131 with Starship included as well, like Falcon Heavy, Falcon 9, and Starship.
And there's more launches coming up very quickly. I mean, tomorrow alone, there's 2 from 2 different coasts. You have NRL 149 set to launch, actually just a couple hours from now at 4:20 a.m. Eastern, 1:20 a.m. local, out of Vandenberg Space Force Base, which you won't be able to see but hear. And then, as mentioned, the O3B M-Power 7 and 8 mission, which is vertical currently at LC-39A at the Kennedy Space Center. Correction, we just got an update that it is now targeting 5:20 a.m. Pacific Time or 8:20 a.m. Eastern out of Vandenberg Space Force Base for the NRL mission, per an email just sent out from Space Launch Delta 30, which is the team that works over to Vandenberg. So, breaking news, ladies and gentlemen, and all in between. Let's see here. Again, working on getting those final replays up for you. In fact, I got a great idea. How about we start playing them now? Jay,
Yes,
whenever you're ready, take it away.
I love always Fleet Cam. Fleet Cam is like this giant fireball rising.
It never disappoints, does it?
Yeah, it's just like, oh, it's beautiful calm waters in the port. There's some boats, there's some cranes, and then, oh my gosh, the whole sky ignites.
Artificial sunrise at its finest.
And we talk about it, you've probably heard us say it turns night into day, but it's really hard to explain if you haven't seen it how true that is. Given the color of it, given the brightness, and the fact, especially with clouds sometimes, that it can just amplify how far it spreads, lighting up the clouds. It really does feel like daytime sometimes, right, Max?
Absolutely, and that's one of the benefits that we get visually from rockets that use either RP-1 and or solid rocket boosters or motors, depending on who you are, i.e. ULA with the Atlas V, or SLS with its gigantic solid rocket boosters. So, my gosh, it is so pretty. Holy cow! I'm just watching it right now. Wow.
Yeah, that's the other interesting thing is Max getting to watch these replays for the first time, because you only saw it with the Mark 1 eyeballs. You haven't actually seen the full replays yet.
Yeah, not yet. And even then, I'm mostly looking at a screen the whole time. I mean, there are some windows in there where I try to like peek my eyes up and look at it, but especially when it's going through a critical point in flight, just about to go supersonic. You want to make sure you are on alert for any vapor cone that may occur. And tonight we got a rather insane one, so thankfully that worked out. But oh my goodness, that ball of light just is incredible. You have
Yeah.
to see it with your own eyes. There is no video, there is no photo. As hard as we try, no video or photo does it justice. And especially if you watch from close or far away, it hits you just about the same. It's absolutely remarkable.
Oh, you absolutely see that brightness regardless. And yeah, when you're trying to track these or take photos of them, usually right at liftoff, you can get a good eye for it if you have your camera settings right. And then after
Correct.
that, where can you take a half second to look away from it just to admire the beauty of it while trying to track it and hope that it's still in frame before looking right back down? That's also why we recommend that anyone who sees a launch in person for the first time put the camera down, just enjoy the view, and especially enjoy the audio, which we will let you listen to on this track from Max. Takes a second to hit the microphones at the press site, which are a couple miles away, but then we bring the boom. That's what Falcon does. I gotta ask, Max, seeing your own track back, what are your thoughts?
I mean, it looks just about the same as it did on the monitor. But being able to just watch it and not have to worry about my hand being either too heavy on the lever here by the camera or being too very or just trying to be still enough with my other hand in helping guide it. It's rather nice, I do have to say. And the audio, I'm super glad to hear that the audio came through pretty clean. A little bit of peaking there, so there's still a little bit more work to do there on my part. But yeah, that was beautiful as always. Golly.
That vapor cone, you were talking about it earlier. Seeing that vapor cone was just spectacular view on this one.
It's also a huge treat to see Falcon 9 fly on a northeast flight path from Slick 40, because if we see Falcon 9, as we often do for either ISS resupply missions or crew missions from 39A, our perspective here at the press site, excuse me, the rocket is flying away from us. So we do get a little bit of an arch from here, but it's more so up and down as in terms of once it reaches apogee from our eyeballs before it curves over before it curves over in its flight path. But from Slick 40, when it launches northeast, from this perspective, we get a unique side-on view of Falcon 9 that we don't otherwise normally get. Because also, with Slick 40, as we often get nowadays with the Starlink Group 6 missions, for example, where they're flying southeast, that too also is flying away from you. So you don't get too wide of an arc there to follow it. So it is a huge treat to see a side profile from Falcon 9 every once in a while.
Oh, it really is. Yeah, especially once we had the first crew launch from 40, that I'm sure was a treat to see, and always great to see the northeasterly flight tracks. I can concur. Although, there will be another launch coming from the Cape in just about 24 hours, so we will get you ready for that. First, I want to thank the people who joined us here for tonight's launch. Max, thank you so much for rolling out and tracking and everything.
It has been a pleasure as always, everybody, and thank you very much for coming to hang out with us tonight. It was fun for us. We hope it was fun for you, and we will hopefully see you tomorrow evening for another Falcon 9 launch.
Exactly. Make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell. It is free so that you know when we go live for all of these launches. Adrian, thank you as well for joining me here on commentary.
Absolutely, it was really fun. GPS has not been my specialty before this, so it was really fun for me to catch up on like all the developments on GPS. Totally interesting and not something you're like talking about every single launch. So I really loved to dig into this a bit and understand GPS a bit more and to commentate with you, Sawyer. So yeah, absolute pleasure.
Yes, I will say it is a lot of fun, a lot more fun researching these flights when it is something other than a Starlink. 'Cause then you get to dig into the history and things that you wouldn't normally look up. So it is a lot of fun. And
Yeah,
Jay
absolutely.
Keegan pushing the buttons, pulling the levers, bringing the views. Thank you so much for doing that as well. I am Sawyer Rosenstein. I have been your host for today's launch. Again, make sure you check us out on all the socials for awesome photos and videos of these launches. We're on X, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, all the above. Hopefully, we will see you right back here tomorrow for Falcon 9 and O3B mPower 7 and 8. Until then, if you haven't already, check out Starbase Update, and we will see you guys next time.
And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal. R68 chamber pressure looks good. Following up. Roger, roger, planet.
Water towers, fly! Yes! Tango down to nominal.
Flight downside FTD off. Bring in FTD off. Off. It's orange! 125! Oh my god! Oh my god! Decollage! What is it? Put that in the big bag, Eagle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
This methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You dead? Sure. We don't need any more of these.